C'est mon plaisir de vous voir, au moins en virtuel aujourd'hui. Je suis ravie d'être ici ensemble avec vous cet après-midi. So again, my name is Mireille Millette. I'm the Director of Advancement and Alumni Relations at Glendon. Thank you so much, everyone who's joining. I can see the attendees joining us now. So we'll just give everyone a minute to come into the room and settle in. If at any point you have any questions, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Si vous avez des questions, il y a la boîte Q&A, Q&A, au bas de votre écran pour que vous puissiez envoyer une question à notre équipe. So I can see we're starting to fill up our room, which is great. It's our first event back since March 2020 for the Glendon Advancement and Alumni team. So we're excited to get started this afternoon. Seems like we've been away for a long time. And, you know, we're thrilled to be able to bring you this webinar with Prof Principal par intérim Ian Roberge and Valérie Schoof, one of our researchers who's just received a York Research Chair, the first one at Glendon. And what we wanted to accomplish with these events is really to give you a sense of our community, to give you a sense of some of the fascinating people that are still working hard at Glendon, either as researchers, professors, and later on in the series, we'll introduce you to some students and some alumni. Donc, pour commencer avec la déclaration de reconnaissance de nos territoires traditionnels, comme nous ne sommes pas tous réunis en même lieu, nous sommes conscients que cette reconnaissance des territoires ne s'applique peut-être pas au territoire sur lequel vous vous trouvez actuellement. Si c'est le cas, nous vous demandons de prendre la responsabilité de reconnaître le territoire traditionnel sur lequel vous vous trouvez. Nous reconnaissons que de nombreuses nations autochtones ont, avec les territoires sur lesquels le campus de l'Université York sont situés, dont des relations de longue date qui précèdent l'établissement de l'Université York. L'Université York reconnaît sa présence sur le territoire traditionnel de nombreuses nations autochtones. La région, connue comme Takaranto, a été préservée par la nation Anishinaabeg, la Confédération Haudenosaunee, les Hurons-Wendat et les Métis. Elle est désormais foyer d'un grand nombre de peuples autochtones. Nous reconnaissons les titulaires actuels du traité, la Première Nation des Mississauga de Crédit. Ce territoire est soumis au traité de la ceinture Wampum, Dish with One Spoon, en tant définissant le partage et la préservation de la région des Grands Lacs. So just again, if you have any questions at any point in time, use the Q&A box in the bottom center of your screen. Our team will be there to help you. And I'm happy now to introduce our Fireside Chat host, Ian Roberge, le principal par intérim de Glendon. Merci beaucoup, Ian, et je vous cède la parole.
Merci, Mireille. Je crois que vous aviez quelques questions à poser à nos invités en début. Est-ce que je ne m'abuse? Non, on y va directement avec la présentation?
Ah, désolé, oui, Ian a raison. Comme toujours, il y a une question. There's one poll question up. Sorry there, I got ahead of myself in my notes. So there's one poll question. You'll see a few polls throughout the presentation. Vous allez voir quelques questions à travers la présentation, juste pour vous encourager à participer un petit peu. Merci.
You know, I am trying to follow the rollout. I'm doing, that's the effort. Marianne, do you want to get that first poll up and running? You can see the question there. We'll give you a few seconds to respond. And we'll give Marianne an opportunity to share the results. Pendant que vous remplissez, pendant que vous répondez à cette question, tout simplement dire bonne fin d'après-midi à tous. Mon nom, pour ceux qui ne me connaîtraient pas, est Ian Roberge. Je suis le principal par intérim du campus Glendon de l'Université York. C'est un grand plaisir de vous retrouver, si ce n'est que parfois virtuel avec nous cet après-midi. Voilà les résultats du court sondage. Si cela vous intéressait, si vous étiez suffisamment intrigué. Merci, Marine. Let me start by saying this. A couple of things as we begin the event on this day. A couple of things as we begin. So Glendon Campus, York University, as the rest of the university did, we've moved remote 6 months ago. Mireille alluded to it. But as we enter this fall term, we are offering our full programming and our full list of courses, and we are fully and completely operational. But one of the challenges, obviously, that we have is that we're not directly on campus. There are nice pictures of campus that we can use as our Zoom background, but we're not directly on campus. So our faculty members have worked really, really hard to deliver excellent programming to our students. But one of the things that we want to do is really focus on our community, connecting with our community, and really everyone on this call today is part of this community. And the Fireside Chat, the idea behind the Fireside Chat is to allow for us to connect with you and to allow for you to connect with us and to connect with campus, even though we are doing so virtually and we're not actually in front of the Manor or in one of the nice rooms in the Manor or even in the new Center of Excellence. Je suis particulièrement heureux de débuter cette première de la série en conversation avec la professeure Valérie Schoof, qui est récipiendaire d'une chaire de recherche de l'Université York. C'est à Glendon la première récipiendaire d'une telle chaire. The York Research Chair is an important program for York University. It serves two basic purposes. The first one is to really highlight and showcase the excellent research that is conducted at York and that is really conducted across the whole of the university, across the various faculties, and obviously at Glendon. Valérie, la professeure Schoof, exemplifie vraiment, est l'exemple de la qualité de la recherche qui se fait au quotidien à Glendon et à travers l'université. And the second part, and this is to an extent why we're starting the Fireside Chat with Professor Schoof tonight, is it is about not only that showcase and the celebration of excellence, but it's the capacity to share and to communicate that with external audience. And thus, we're starting with the Fireside Chat series with Professor Schoof to highlight, to show you, to speak to everyone in our community, whether you're part of a faculty member, staff, but especially our alumni. Look, this is the excellent work that's being done on our campus. So before we move to the Q&A, let me introduce Professor Valérie Schoof, Associate Professor in Biology and first recipient of a York Research Chair in Primate Behavioral Endocrinology. She is director of the first and only Canadian research laboratory dedicated to primate endocrinology, the study of hormones. The Primate Behavioral Endocrinology Lab, which is the name of the lab I've just referred. Dr. Schoof leads a team focused on integration of primate behavior, their hormones, and conservation. Her research focuses on the ecological, social, and physiological factors that influence and are influenced by individual variation in behavior and reproduction. She uses a multidisciplinary approach to understand how primates navigate the complexities of competition and cooperation associated with life in social groups. Beyond her research in Canada, most of the data collection for Dr. Schoof's work is done in East Africa, specifically in Uganda and Kenya. Her NSERC-funded research program focuses on the behavioral ecology and life history of wild vervet monkeys living in a humanized landscape along the shores of Lake Nabugabo in southwestern Uganda. She uses an individual approach to examine behavior and physiology, but just as critically important is her use of a longitudinal, c'est un mot que je n'ai jamais aimé en anglais, approach, which allows her to examine intra-individual variation across different life history stages. Her New Frontiers in Research Fund supports a collaborative project that uses a biogeocultural approach to understand human-primate interaction. To date, her work has been published in the American Journal of Physical Anthropology, Behavior, American Journal of Primatology, General and Comparative Endocrinology, and PLOS1, among others. Je vais demander à Valérie d'ouvrir sa caméra pour qu'elle se joigne à nous. Voilà, bonsoir Valérie, ça va?
Bonsoir Yann, oui, merci beaucoup pour l'invitation. Ça me fait plaisir de vous rejoindre.
Et je vais arrêter d'alterner entre professeur Schoof et Valérie et on va faire ça de façon un petit peu plus naturelle et un petit peu moins formelle.
Absolument.
So we do have some prepared questions here for you, and I know you've got a few slides to share with all of our guests tonight. Valérie, primatology is a new concept to some of our audience members. How would you describe your work and its impact in particular to a non-scientist?
Thank you for the question. So primatology simply is the scientific study of primates. And so what is a primate? Well, primates, there's no one characteristic that helps us to identify anatomical and behavioral characteristics, but essentially the primates include the lemurs and lorises, so prosimians that are found in Madagascar and in Africa. Most people know that can be found again throughout Africa and the Americas, as well as throughout Asia. And of course the apes, which include humans. So humans are primates. Now let me go ahead and share some of my slides here that I've prepared to help talk a little bit about my research in primatology is. So primatology as a field is very interdisciplinary in its nature. So primatologists or people who study primates can do so from any number of different disciplines, if you will. So my undergraduate training is in biology, but my graduate training is actually in biological anthropology. So the university that I did my graduate studies at had a focus on primates in terms of how can they help us learn about human evolution. But primatologists can also be found in zoology departments, in biomedical departments. People who are interested in primate cognition may come from a psychology background. Those who are interested in diseases, whether they're human diseases or animal diseases, may come from a more genetics background. And there are also people who come from a more ecological backgrounds, really looking at how primates interact with their environment. So primatology is very interdisciplinary, and that again is just because the term itself simply means the scientific study of primates. So really anything that relates to primates can be considered primatology. Let me see, I'm trying to switch slides here. There we go. So my research in particular in primatology is really focused originally around reproductive competition in males. Essentially, my research is a combination of field research, which means that with my field team, the people that I work with, and graduate students and undergrads, we go to the places where primates live in the wild. So this, again, the places that I have worked include Costa Rica as well as Uganda. And there we follow individual monkeys and we record their behavior, and we also collect samples. Samples of what, you might ask? Well, they're poop samples. Lots and lots of poop samples. And biologists love fecal samples because they're little nuggets of information that you can get from your study animals without having to capture them. So you can collect a lot of information about their biology, so their hormones, their genetics, even diseases and what they eat from these fecal samples. And then I take those fecal samples and together with my team, we analyze them and look primarily at hormone levels. The hormones of particular interest in the males that we study are glucocorticoids, which are hormones that are triggered as one aspect of the stress response, and also a group of hormones called androgens. So these will include testosterone and dihydrotestosterone. So these are hormones that tend to be involved in aggression, the development of secondary sex characteristics, so ornaments and weapons and so on. And so together, this is what my research focuses on. So the lab is primate, behavioral, and endocrinology is simply the study of the endocrine system, so the study of hormones. Along with some collaborators, we also look at disease, so looking at fecal parasites, as well as some genetics, so looking at who is related to whom, and so on. So as noted, to date, my research has focused primarily on reproductive competition in male primates, and this certainly does continue to be a key area of study for me. My career as a primatologist really started when I worked at the Tulane Primate Center, where, again, I studied primates from a biomedical perspective, or rather in a biomedical lab. So primates can play a really important role in health research. So for example, currently there are some primates on whom COVID-19 vaccines have been tested, so can play a really crucial role. But one of the other things that's important when studying primates in captivity is also making sure that they're in proper and appropriate healthy social living conditions. So one of the things that I did there was making sure that they were in social groups whenever possible that might mimic as much as possible their living conditions in the wild. From there, I started to do my graduate research on capuchin monkeys in Santa Rosa National Park in Costa Rica. And there I studied the behavior of hormones in male capuchins to better understand how they balance the need to cooperate with each other in the defense of their social group against other such group of males, and the need at the same time to compete with the males with whom they live in a group. So basically, you have groups with multiple males and multiple females, and those males have to cooperate against other groups of males, but they still have to compete with each other in order to mate with the females. Santa Rosa is home to 2 other species of primates. It's a really lovely, lovely place to work. And lots and lots of different animal species live there: jaguars, deer, coatis, sea turtles, numerous tropical birds and plants. And it's a really lovely protected area that was established in the 1970s and is a combination of old growth hormone and regenerating forest. That said, on the outside of the park borders are really cattle ranches. And, you know, sometimes you might have some human wildlife interaction in the park, but it wasn't something I experienced very often. It wasn't until I moved on and did a postdoc at McGill University studying red colobus monkeys in Kibale National Park in Western Uganda that I really became more aware of this interaction between humans and wildlife. I was really excited to work with these monkeys because they have a completely different social system to capuchins. So while they also live in groups with multiple males and multiple females, in capuchins, when males become sexually mature, they leave their group in search of joining another group. In contrast, in the red colobus, the males actually stay in their birth group, and it's the females that leave. So that means that the males within the groups are related to each other. So I was really interested in how this social structure might affect social relationships among the males. Kibale National Park is home to about 12 primate species, including its best known resident, the chimpanzee, but it also has numerous other mammals, including small deer, elephants, and so on. And in Kibale is really what got me thinking a little bit more beyond my interest in reproductive strategies to conservation issues. Because even though the monkeys that I technically studied lived in the national park, they were in fact right at the edge. And so sometimes they would wander outside of the forest that had been converted, say, to a small sustenance plot, agricultural plot, or a tea plantation, or a eucalyptus grove, or something like that. And at the time that I was at Kibale, I also had numerous colleagues who studied the chimpanzees, and they had numerous accounts of chimpanzees being injured by snares that had been placed by poachers, so animals that were hunting wildlife. And even though the chimpanzees weren't the primary target of these snares or of the poachers, snares can't differentiate between different species. So sometimes it meant that chimpanzees got caught. And it's not just the humans that don't always respect the park boundaries and that come into the park, but rather sometimes the animals, especially species like chimpanzees or other ground-dwelling primates like baboons, would actually venture out of the park and cause trouble in some of these small farms. When I was finishing my work on the red colobus for my postdoc, I was invited to conduct research at a different field site in Uganda, at Lake Nabagabo. This is a small satellite lake off of Lake Victoria, and here I started studying vervet monkeys. And even though they live very far away from capuchin monkeys, they actually have a lot of similarities in their social systems. So again, in the vervet monkeys, the males are the ones who leave their birth group in search of another group to join. So that's one example of how they're similar. They also have a much more fruit-based diet compared to colobus, who eat a lot more leaves, for example. The vervets that I study at Lake Nabagabo live outside of a national park, which has really brought to the forefront my awareness of the range of conservation issues. So I do study, I continue my research on the complexities of social living, life history. So that's really a question about the pace of life. So the speed at which individuals mature and go through different life events. I'm also interested in dispersal. So again, when males move from their birth group to other groups and how that might happen in a place where the landscape is really fragmented. And my research has also included now some work on human-wildlife interaction. I'll tell you a little bit more about these, but let me start by telling you a little bit more about vervets and my field site. So vervet monkeys can be found in a very wide range of habitats. They're found throughout sub-Saharan Africa and in habitats ranging from woodlands to savannas, as well as forest grassland mosaics. So really in areas, they can live in areas that are quite disturbed. The species is very adaptable, in part because of its omnivorous diet. This means that they essentially eat fruits, they eat leaves, they eat flowers, they will eat insects, they can even eat small mammals or bird eggs if they can get their hands on them. So essentially they have a very generalist diet. And as a result, the vervets are able to persist in lower quality forest or areas that have been fragmented. And that includes cultivated areas as well as sometimes on the edges of rural and urban environments. So vervets tend to live, as I've mentioned, in groups of multiple males and multiple females, in groups of up to about 38, but again, group size can vary quite a bit. And the groups consist of related females because the females generally don't leave their birth group, but there are also going to be natal males, so males who were born in the group, and then immigrant males. So those are males that came from outside of the group that are past sexual maturity. The vervet monkeys are not especially threatened when we look at the IUCN, or the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. This species is graded as least concern. And again, this is because they're found across a wide range and in of land, but also they have a fairly large population size and they are highly adaptable. While there are no maybe major threats to vervets, they can be found as a source of bushmeat in a few areas. And although they are classified as vermin or pests in parts of their range, that means that they can be actively persecuted or killed by landowners in areas where these monkeys feed on crops, for example. The actual area that I study these monkeys in is the village of Bale on the shores of Lake Nabagabo in southwestern Uganda. So Lake Nabagabo is a very small satellite lake to Lake Victoria. The landscape around the lake is comprised of a mosaic of wetlands, grasslands. It has patches of swamp forest. There's also a few buildings, so some resorts, if you will. There's also the village nearby. There's degraded forest. There's some farmers' fields. And again, there's a few buildings there. So it's really a very mosaic and fragmented landscape where there's a lot of spatial overlap between where humans and primates live. So here you can see in these photos, in two of them, you have monkeys that are very, very close to buildings, and in one of them sitting on a fence post, being quite vigilant and keeping an eye out for humans, and dogs are the other major threat to vervets in this area. I also want to give a shout out to some of these photos, which were taken by Anita Toshiba, and I did see her name on the list of participants this evening. And Anita is a former student who had the wonderful opportunity of coming to Uganda with me and another student to conduct some research. So thank you, Anita. I definitely used some of your photos, your beautiful photos. You'll see a few probably throughout the slideshow. So in terms of the research that I do here, again, the primary focus of my research continues to be on the complexities that are associated with life in groups. So as Ian mentioned, my research is individual and longitudinal in nature. What this means is that the field assistants that I work with, so my colleagues in Uganda and in Kenya, can individually recognize the monkeys, and when they collect behavioral data and demographic data, so on age, who's had an infant, who's died, who has an injury, for example, we know who that monkey is, as opposed to just being an alpha male or a subadult female. We have really detailed information, and this allows us to follow individuals throughout their lives. And we're interested in seeing what are the factors that influence variation between individuals? So how some adult males might behave in one way and other adult males might behave in a different way, but also how behavior changes throughout the lifetime of an individual. So for example, are there changes in the reproductive tactics of a male throughout his life history? So does the way that a male try to gain access to females, does that differ when he's a young, subadult, recently sexually mature male? Or, you know, and does he use a different strategy when he's a very old male versus when he's a male in his prime? While my focus has traditionally been on males, I'm also interested in looking at factors influencing female reproductive success. So with some students, we're looking at the role of female dominance, social connectedness, and health, as well as the link between the timing of reproduction and the timing of food availability in this landscape. As mentioned, another research area is trying to understand how landscape fragmentation might impact dispersal. So the way that dispersal happens, this is again when males are moving from one group to another. Normally they move to a neighboring group, and they may move, or if you will, hopscotch from one neighboring group to another until they find one that they end up settling in for some time. But if there are no neighboring groups because there's no suitable landscape for vervets to live in that area, then that really limits where males can go. And essentially it can cause a kind of shrinkage of populations where you can have the movement of males. So what does this impact, or what does this change in the landscape and the ability of individuals to move through that landscape? What can that do? So I think hopefully that's a bit of an introduction to primatology as a whole. I do hope that as we have more questions, we'll be able to move on, and I'll be able to show you some more cute pictures. As I said, many of them taken by the lovely Anita.
Merci beaucoup, Valérie. Je note deux choses. Premièrement, nos étudiants sont extrêmement choyés de deux façons. Ils ont droit à des explications complètes, claires et précises. Donc déjà là, c'est une merveilleuse opportunité. Et deuxième élément, tu viens de le mentionner, une étudiante qui a la possibilité de faire de la recherche sur le terrain, bien, c'est quand même une magnifique chance que cette étudiante a eue. Donc, merci beaucoup pour ça. Je passe à la deuxième question. Peut-être avec cette fois-ci, Valérie, une réponse un petit peu plus rapide. Lors de ton interview avec le journal L'Express, ça a été publié, je crois, l'an passé, tu as mentionné que tes recherches impliquent également un travail avec les communautés locales. D'ailleurs, tu y as fait référence aussi dans ta première réponse en notant l'interaction entre les animaux et les êtres humains. Peux-tu nous en dire plus sur ce sujet et surtout quelle en est son importance?
Merci, Yann. Je vais essayer d'être plus rapide, mais bon. Je suis professeur, je veux toujours donner des bonnes explications.
C'est l'une de nos prérogatives quand même.
Oui, exactement, exactement. Donc, je suis désolée si on est un peu en retard. Mais bon, alors en raison de, si on veut, l'utilisation des ressources et des paysages par et les humains et les primates, ainsi que d'autres animaux domestiqués ou des animaux domestiqués comme les vaches, les chiens, etc., ça peut mener à des interactions entre les humains et les primates. Et ça peut avoir des implications pour la santé et des primates et des communautés où ces primates vivent. Donc, une des études qu'on a fait, par exemple, c'était de voir possiblement la transmission ou au moins le nombre de parasites qu'on retrouve chez les primates sur ce site. Parce que les parasites sont seulement une de plusieurs, si on veut, maladies qui pourraient être transmises des primates vers les humains, donc vers les communautés où on étudie, mais aussi des communautés vers les primates. Et justement, on voit que les primates à Nabugabo, où on a beaucoup de overlap entre la communauté humaine et les primates, les singes vervettes, on a beaucoup plus d'espèces de parasites présentes que dans d'autres endroits en Afrique centrale et l'Afrique du Sud, sur le continent où les vervettes sont étudiées. Je vais sauter un peu cette image-là. Mais en fait, en raison de ce partage, si on veut, du paysage, ça peut mener aussi non seulement à des complications pour la santé humaine et la santé des primates, mais aussi à des conflits. Donc, l'endroit au lac Nabugabo où je travaille avec mon équipe, la grande majorité des gens dans la communauté ont des petits jardins qui servent vraiment pour comme leur source primaire de nourriture. Donc, ils vont planter du maïs, ils vont planter des fèves, des patates, etc. Malheureusement, en ce qui concerne les singes, il semble qu'ils ne distinguent pas entre la nourriture disponible, si on veut, naturellement dans le paysage et la nourriture que les humains ont plantée. Et donc, pour eux, ils vont souvent manger cette nourriture que les gens ont plantée. Et comme c'est pas surprenant, ça peut mener à du conflit. Donc, et ce conflit peut être problématique et bien évidemment, c'est problématique pour les gens qui perdent leur source de nourriture, mais aussi pour les singes. Donc, certaines des stratégies que les gens locaux utilisent pour essayer de réduire ce conflit ou d'éviter que leur nourriture soit mangée, c'est d'avoir, de mettre du poison, par exemple, d'essayer d'attraper les singes, des fois de les tuer, de mettre des traps, excusez-moi, là, ça ne me vient pas. Alors, on a eu certainement à deux ou trois reprises même des événements de mortalité assez extrêmes dans notre communauté de singes vervettes. Donc, comme quelqu'un qui étudie les primates, je ne peux pas, c'est pas possible d'ignorer les problèmes que ça peut causer pour les humains dans la communauté. En fait, c'est possible, mais c'est pas très éthique. Et dans les premières années où je faisais mes études, là, je trouvais ça assez difficile, mais c'était pas dans mon expertise de recherche. Mais maintenant, en collaboration avec d'autres chercheurs, on essaie d'étudier un peu plus et d'avoir un effet positif pour essayer de réduire les effets des interactions négatives entre les humains et les primates. Et si on regarde la distribution des primates à travers le monde, on voit qu'ils se retrouvent surtout, si on veut, vers l'équateur, et que en rouge, on voit la proportion des espèces de primates qui sont considérées d'être en danger. Et c'est donc, en fait, on voit qu'au moins 60% des 500 plus espèces de primates sont en danger d'extinction, pas juste en raison de conflits directs entre humains et les animaux eux-mêmes, mais surtout en raison de la modification des paysages, en raison de la déforestation, la dégradation et la fragmentation des habitats. Donc, dans l'image du haut, par exemple, vous pouvez voir la distribution des primates. Dans la deuxième image, c'est une projection des endroits où on pense avoir les plus grands changements au paysage. Et ces changements au paysage vont avoir comme effet d'augmenter les interactions entre les humains et les primates, y compris dans les communautés locales qui sont vraiment le plus affectées par ces interactions. Et vraiment, on est dans une crise de biodiversité. Je pense que je n'annonce rien de nouveau ici. Donc, la crise de biodiversité n'affecte pas juste les primates, mais en fait, les animaux et les plantes, etc., à travers le monde. Donc, c'est vraiment une crise présente qui affecte plusieurs espèces. Mais lorsqu'on parle des primates, on peut avoir peut-être un effet non seulement sur la conservation des primates, mais sur la conservation de plusieurs espèces. Et c'est en raison du fait que les primates, peuvent être considérés souvent comme des espèces vedettes, des espèces qu'on appelle aussi parapluies. Des espèces vedettes sont tout simplement les espèces qui sont, si on veut, les plus jolies ou les plus mignonnes, lesquelles avec qui les humains ont vraiment un rapport plus important. Et justement, comme les humains sont des primates, on peut souvent considérer les primates comme étant des espèces que les gens veulent conserver, veulent mettre un effort, veulent mettre de l'argent. Donc, les primates, oui, on peut conserver les primates, mais aussi en conservant les primates qui jouent un rôle important dans l'écosystème, par exemple dans la dispersion des graines des plantes, par le fait qu'ils utilisent des paysages assez larges qui comprennent d'autres animaux et des plantes. Si on protège les primates et on protège leur paysage, on protège par vertu d'autres espèces. Donc, c'est pourquoi je pense que la conservation des primates peut être vraiment importante et c'est important, bien entendu, de parler et de développer ces stratégies dans les communautés qui sont les plus affectées. Donc, les deux grandes stratégies que mon équipe et moi utilisent, c'est vraiment de s'engager avec les communautés locales et de faire de la recherche. Dans notre engagement dans la communauté locale, la première chose, c'est d'écouter. D'écouter les gens qui sont frustrés que les primates mangent leur nourriture et d'exprimer que ce n'est pas notre volonté. Si c'était notre choix, si on pouvait les contrôler, on arrêterait. Donc, vraiment d'écouter quels sont les problèmes qu'eux identifient. Aussi, tous les assistants de recherche viennent de la communauté locale. Donc, ici, je vous présente 3 de nos assistants stars, M. Matovu, M. Livingston et M. Hillary, qui viennent tous de la communauté et qui, par vertu de leur présence dans la communauté, ça permet, en les embauchant, de donner plus d'argent dans les communautés. Ça donne donc un effet positif de notre présence comme chercheurs sur les communautés en ayant au moins un peu de capacité économique. Aussi, quelque chose qu'on commence à initier, mais qui a été un peu repoussé en raison de la pandémie globale, ce sont des initiatives, éducationnelles. Donc, il y a des écoles primaires et nous voulons avoir plus de présentations et de discussions vraiment avec les enfants parce que les enfants sont les adultes du futur et donc vont jouer un rôle important dans la conservation de la biodiversité. Du côté de la recherche, on continue notre recherche sur l'histoire naturelle des espèces, c'est-à-dire tout simplement qu'est-ce que ces primates utilisent comme nourriture, quelle partie de l'environnement est-ce qu'ils utilisent, quand est-ce qu'ils mangent, par exemple, vont manger dans les jardins. Et ensuite, un des nouveaux projets, c'est d'essayer d'évaluer différentes stratégies pour minimiser ce risque qu'ils vont manger la nourriture. Et aussi, comment est-ce qu'on peut augmenter la tolérance à la présence des singes. Et dernièrement, c'est vraiment l'idée d'avoir de la recherche et des connaissances qui sont co-créées avec la communauté. C'est vraiment une question d'éthique très importante pour moi et sur laquelle je suis de plus en plus consciente. Traditionnellement, la biologie et la primatologie, ce sont beaucoup des chercheurs blancs qui vont dans des pays autres et on extrait, si on veut, des connaissances, on pose des questions qui nous intéressent et on ramène ces connaissances dans nos pays. Mais on n'est pas des membres des communautés locales. On ne fait pas nécessairement de la recherche sur des questions d'importance à ces communautés. Donc, j'aimerais vraiment commencer beaucoup plus à avoir des membres de la communauté qui nous indiquent quelles sont les questions de recherche qui les intéressent et comment est-ce qu'on peut développer ensemble des projets de recherche afin de vraiment inclure les communautés locales et que ça soit, si on veut, un peu moins colonial comme entreprise de recherche. Donc, j'espère que j'ai répondu à ta question, Yann, un peu plus rapidement peut-être.
Merci Valérie. Le dernier élément que tu as mentionné m'apparaît vraiment important. I'm going to invite our guests, if you do have questions, I see that time is flying by. If you do have questions, to please submit them in the Q&A and we will start asking them. There was a question there earlier that's since been taken down, but the question was asked from one of your colleagues here at York, which is how does the York Research Chair enhances your capacity to do research and how does it play out in terms of, in particular, in terms of your lab?
That's a great question. Thank you very much for that. So the York Research Chair is really important in, I think, for any researcher at York in general, but at Glendon especially. Glendon is a wonderful place where I have the opportunity to teach, do research, and also work with my colleagues on a number of issues. That said, there's not always enough time to do research, and it can be quite time consuming to involve students in research as well. So I don't get to do it quite as much as I would like. And so with the York Research Chair, there are two wonderful things that support my research program. Those are teaching releases. So I still am lucky that I get to teach students, so I still participate and have lectures. However, I can also dedicate a little bit more time to research, including research with undergrads. So we don't get any kind of, I guess, it doesn't count towards our teaching when we supervise undergraduate students in our research programs. But for me, it's one of my favorite parts. I do like to teach in a classroom, but being able to see the growth of students, whether they're undergrads or grad students, when they participate in research, either in the field or on previously collected data, or now on hormone analyses that they'll be able to do themselves, is really, really absolutely my favorite part of the job. The other great thing that this York Research Chair comes with is some funding. So one of the things that Ian mentioned is I do have several external grants that help to support research, but research is costly, especially research that is conducted in Uganda. Conservation research is expensive, and this gives some level of certainty that this project, which again is a long-term project, because we're trying to see how individuals change throughout their lifetime, trying to get grants every 2 years to fund that is extremely stressful, especially when people's livelihoods are depending on you. So this guarantees that my research project, all things, I guess, being equal, will be able to continue for at least 5 years. And even during this global pandemic, my field assistants that I work with, they are excellent colleagues. They know the monkeys better than I do, and they are out there as long as it's safe, and of course following their local and regional health guidelines, but they are out there collecting data when my students and I have not been able to go to the field, but data collection and research can continue.
Merci, Valérie. There are two parts to your response that I note. The first is obviously the commitment to the research and the research project and your capacity to continue even during the pandemic. But there's also a commitment to students there, and I think that is really strong for Glendon. So I see Marine has put our second poll up for consideration. So I do invite everyone on the Zoom call to take advantage and just to provide a quick response to the question that is there. And Marine will slowly move to show the response as they've come up.
Okay. Well, it's great to see so many people have heard about our biology program. So that's excellent.
Nous arrivons, so maybe I'm going to throw it out all one more time. No, we're going back to Mireille. We're going back to Mireille to bring this to a close. If you do have a few more questions on the Q&A, you can send them in. We can provide some answers for you. We can reach out to you and provide some answers. So do feel free to do that. But Mireille can assist as we proceed towards moving towards slowly the end of this Fireside Chat.
Merci, Ian. Thank you, everyone. I just wanted to echo Ian's request for any more questions. And I haven't seen any new come in. Oh, actually, here's one right now. So let me get to that one. So Valérie, regarding your specific research topic, I understand you've worked mainly with different populations of monkeys, but are there any similarities or differences between the behavior of those male populations of monkeys and apes, such as chimps, gorillas, and orangutans?
Yes, that is a great question. So there are certainly some similarities with some of the species that I've studied. So for example, orangutans, chimpanzees, and bonobos, for example, are all omnivorous primates. So they eat a lot of fruit and they'll eat whatever they can. So those are similar to capuchin monkeys and vervet monkeys. One difference is gorillas tend to eat mostly leaves. So they're more similar to the red colobus monkeys. So those are some differences sort of across the board, some similarities and differences there. One of the major differences that you'll see between the apes and monkeys in general is the apes tend to be much larger in body size. So there'll be medium and large examples. So you might have heard of also lesser apes, which would be gibbons and siamangs, whereas most monkeys will be medium to smaller size. So a baboon is going to be one of the largest, or gelada baboons are going to be some of the largest primates that you'll see, going all the way down to the size of something that would fit in the palm of your hand. So we do have a lot of size variation there. And that has implications for the amount of landscape, the amount of habitat that those different species need in order to be properly conserved. So we want to have as much continuous landscape as we can for larger species. So that's why a lot of the emphasis that we see in conservation is on those larger bodied apes, not only because, again, they're very cute and cuddly, they make great flagship species to get people interested and involved, but also by protecting the habitats of these larger bodied species, we're also protecting the habitat needs of smaller bodied species.
That's great. Thank you, Valerie. And I see that your former student, Annetta, is just saying thank you so much for all the support that you've given her, and wishing you well in continuing in the field. We have a couple more minutes. So I'm just wondering, you mentioned the undergraduate students that you work with in the lab. What kinds of things are they working on, and how has the pandemic sort of forced you to adapt to their work? Since obviously, I'm assuming you haven't traveled any time in the last few months.
That's a great question. So normally for undergrads, most students actually will work on data that have been previously collected. There are some student volunteers, but usually this only lasts for 1 or 2 months just to make sure that they are a good fit for the team. And then as long as I can afford to, I hire them on as the team. So there are some undergraduates who help with data entry and data management. But there are also some undergrads who might be doing their own honors thesis projects. So this is in the 4th year where they might essentially get their first chance at developing a research question, developing predictions, analyzing data. Maybe if they're lucky, they get to collect the data in the field as well. We actually have 2 papers, 2 research projects that we are hoping in the next few months to submit for publication that were led, if you will, or that are outcomes of undergraduate student theses. So some of these theses, one of them is looking at, which is one of the projects that Anita participated on, and which a later undergraduate student analyzed, looking at, I think I'm going to have to share my screen for this one. So primates are interesting in that they're the most colorful of all mammals, and vervets in particular, which you'll see down here on the bottom right, have some coloration in a rather special place. So vervets have this the vervet males have some unique genital coloration. And so the males have a blue scrotum and a red penis, but it's not universally all the same color. Some males are going to be bluer than others, and some are going to be redder than others. So one of the projects is trying to explain what those differences are, or what are the factors that are related to those differences. So essentially we found that age seems to be a major predictor, as well of penile coloration, so of the red color, but that dominance rank and also parasite levels are predictors of the amount of blue. So that's one of the projects, so that'll be coming out soon. In a second project that'll be coming out soon, looking at female reproductive patterns, again with the timing of births in this population, which differs from other vervet populations. So the next question then, of course, because science always begets more questions is, okay, why is it different from elsewhere? So hopefully we'll have another undergraduate student working on that question in the future.
That's fascinating. And just before we bring Ian back to wrap it up, we have one last poll question for our audience. Hopefully everyone will be letting us know if this fireside chat has been an interesting way for you to connect to Glendon. Valérie, my thanks to you and to our audience for listening. I've learned a ton. Particularly interesting to hear that not only pandemic gardeners have challenges with their crops, but also our friends in other countries around the world have other pests to deal with or other animals to deal with. So it's been fantastic. So I'll turn it back over to Ian.
Merci Mireille. Je ne serai pas très long. J'aimerais beaucoup remercier, te remercier Valérie. J'aimerais remercier la Dr Schoof pour le temps qu'elle nous a accordé ce soir, pour le temps de préparation, mais également profiter de cette occasion très publique pour la féliciter pour cette nouvelle chaire de recherche, pour vraiment l'ensemble de ses projets de recherche, de son programme de recherche, qui clairement est particulièrement intéressant tel que nous l'avons entendu en cette fin d'après-midi ce soir et qui est également et surtout, puisque Valérie demeure somme toute une chercheure au début de sa carrière qui est somme toute extrêmement prometteur pour l'avenir. Donc, nous sommes très choyés, très chanceux à Glendon d'avoir des chercheurs tels que la professeure Schoof, d'avoir des gens qui ont un programme de recherche aussi important et qui sont en mesure de faire une aussi belle contribution au savoir. Donc, je m'arrête ici. Je vous remercie tous de nous avoir accompagnés en cette fin d'après-midi et simplement pour clore to close this first fireside chat, let me send it back one more time to Mireille. Thank you very much to everyone who participated today.
Merci, and thank you, everyone. So as we've alluded to throughout the program, this is the first in a series. On présente 3 sessions cet automne. La prochaine, c'est le 12 novembre avec un panel d'étudiants. So coming up on November 12th, we're going to be presenting a panel of our students as change makers. So we have 3 really young, brilliant, rising stars. I can't wait to introduce them to you. So please mark the date for that and watch for the invitation. And finally, we're really always interested in hearing from you and connecting with our alumni, donors, faculty, staff members, former and current students that are online tonight. If you have a suggestion or an idea for how you'd like to bring the community together, please follow us on our social media or send us an email, alumni@glendon.yorku.ca, the same email address that you received your registration confirmation from. We really want to keep in touch. These are unusual times, but our Glendon community is strong, and we're really thrilled to be able to present these sessions to you and hopefully give you a little bit of connection. And with the photo behind me, a little bit of happy memories of our beautiful campus as well while we're away. Donc, un grand merci encore. Si vous avez besoin de nous rejoindre, s'il vous plaît, envoyez-nous un courriel ou trouvez-nous sur les médias sociaux. Un grand merci encore et bonne soirée.